Blood sprayed across shattered marble. Marcus Webb's knuckles split against Duke Theron's jaw, driving the traitor backward through smoke and flame. Ajax's furious barking echoed somewhere beyond the collapsed wall. Empress Selena's scream tore through the chaos, a sound that would haunt him if he survived the next 10 seconds. Theron's hand reached for the fallen plasma rifle. Marcus lunged 70 pounds of momentum and 30 years of suppressed rage colliding with Zarathi nobility. They went down hard. The old combat medic got on top, drove his fist down once, twice, 3 times, until the Duke's eyes rolled back and consciousness fled. The world tilted. Pain exploded across Marcus's back, where shrapnel had punched through Kevlar and flesh. He tried to rise, failed, collapsed onto blood-slicked stone. His vision blurred. Selena's emerald face swam into focus above him, her hands pressing against his wounds, her lips moving in words he couldn't quite hear over the ringing in his ears. The last thing Marcus saw before darkness claimed him was 3 small figures rushing through the smoke, Lyra, Senna, and Kira, their formal dresses torn, their faces streaked with tears, their hands reaching for him. Then nothing. The screen went black. Text appeared 12 weeks earlier, Houston Spaceport. Afternoon heat hammered down on concrete like God's own grudge. Marcus Webb limped through the industrial sprawl of Houston's Spaceport district, sweat darkening the collar of his security contractor uniform. The old shrapnel wound in his left thigh sent sparks up his spine with every step, a souvenir from Desert Storm that doctors said would never fully heal. 34 years later, they'd been right. Ajax padded beside him, the German shepherd's dark eyes scanning the crowd with professional intensity. The service dog vest marked him as off-limits to casual interaction, though plenty of spacers still tried. Most saw the gray in the shepherd's muzzle and moved on. The smart ones noticed how Ajax's ears tracked every sound, how his body remained coiled despite the casual gait, and gave both dog and handler a wide berth. The spaceport had changed in the 6 months since the Treaty of Terra Nova. Zarathi delegation ships now occupied 3 of the southern berths, their organic hulls gleaming like polished jade under the Texas sun. Security barriers divided human and alien zones, a compromise that satisfied no one and insulted everyone. Graffiti covered most available surfaces. Earth for humans in bold red letters, countered by peace symbols and bilingual welcome messages that someone kept painting over. Marcus's radio crackled. His supervisor's voice carried the particular edge of a man dealing with situations above his pay grade. The assignment was simple: escort a Zarathi cultural attaché from the diplomatic quarter to the main embassy compound in the museum district. Should have taken 40 minutes. Should have been routine. Nothing about the Zarathi presence in Houston felt routine. The crowd thickened as Marcus approached the checkpoint where human and alien zones intersected. Dock workers clustered in groups, their body language radiating the kind of tension that preceded bar fights or riots. Some carried signs, others just carried grudges. Ajax growled low in his throat. Marcus's hand drifted toward the sidearm holstered at his hip, an old habit from a different war. His eyes swept the scene, cataloging threats the way his drill sergeant had beaten into him 4 decades ago. That's when he saw them. 3 Zarathi children stood in the middle of the pedestrian corridor, their emerald skin catching the harsh sunlight, their elaborate braided hair marking them as high caste even before you noticed the formal silk dresses that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. The eldest couldn't have been more than 12 by human standards, the youngest maybe 6. They huddled together, wide, luminous eyes darting between the humans closing in around them. A docker in oil-stained coveralls stepped into their path. Well, well, little green royals lost. His buddies laughed. The sound held nothing friendly. The eldest child, a girl with violet highlights in her dark braids, stepped in front of her sisters. Her voice came out steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We seek the Grand Plaza. Our guardian has vanished. Can you direct us?" The docker's grin widened. "Sure thing, sweetheart. Right after you explain what makes you aliens, think you can just walk our streets like you own them." Marcus didn't remember making the decision. One moment he was 20 feet away, the next he was pushing through the crowd, Ajax at his heel, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from ordering men into fire. "Back off, now!" The docker turned, sized up the gray-bearded security guard with the limp and the service dog, and sneered. "Or what, old man? You gonna?" Ajax's growl cut him off. The shepherd had moved between the children and the docker, Hackle's raised teeth bared just enough to remind everyone that German shepherds were bred for war before they were bred for comfort. The docker's friends shifted uneasily. Whatever courage cheap beer and crowd mentality provided, it didn't extend to tangling with a trained military dog and a veteran who looked like he'd already died once and found the experience underwhelming. The docker spat on the concrete and backed away. This ain't over. Marcus waited until the group dispersed before turning to the children. The eldest met his eyes with remarkable composure for someone who'd just been surrounded by hostiles. Thank you, sir. I am Lyra. These are my sisters, Senna and Kira. Our guardian brought us to see the cultural district, but she vanished during a security alert. We cannot locate the embassy. Marcus studied the three of them. Kira's knee was bleeding where she'd scraped it on something. Senna clutched a broken communication device, its organic circuitry sparking intermittently. Their formal attire was torn in places, dust and grime marring expensive fabric. Something cold settled in Marcus's gut, a feeling he recognized from the field hospital tent at Basra, when wounded men started arriving faster than you could treat them, and you knew the situation was deteriorating faster than command admitted. These children hadn't just gotten lost. Someone had abandoned them. A memory flashed an Iraqi girl, maybe 8 years old, bleeding out from shrapnel in a field hospital, while Marcus pressed gauze against wounds that wouldn't stop weeping. Her eyes had held the same desperate trust these Zarathi children showed, now the kind of trust that children shouldn't have to place in strangers, because the adults responsible for their safety had already failed them. He'd whispered apologies while she died in his arms, promises that everything would be okay, even as he felt her pulse fade under his fingers. Marcus pushed the memory down, locked it away with all the others. I'll get you to safety. Stay close to me. Don't touch anything. And if I tell you to move, you move. Understood. All three nodded. Ajax fell into position at their rear, a mobile guardian watching their six. The shepherd had been with Marcus for 8 years now, a retirement gift from the VA that had probably saved his life more times than either of them could count. The nightmare still came, but Ajax woke him before the screaming started, pressed his warm bulk against Marcus's chest until the trembling stopped. They moved through the industrial district in tactical formation Marcus had learned so long ago, it felt like muscle memory. The children kept pace without complaint, despite their formal footwear, clearly not designed for urban hiking. Lyra kept one hand on Senna's shoulder, Senna kept one hand on Kira's, and Kira occasionally reached down to touch Ajax's fur, like the dog was a talisman against the hostile city closing in around them. The security checkpoint loomed ahead. Earth First militia in unofficial uniforms, checking IDs with the kind of enthusiasm that preceded civil rights violations. Marcus steered them toward a service alley. Senna's voice came soft. Commander, our guardian did not lose us. Marcus glanced back. What I heard her speaking with a man in a dark cloak. Before the alert, she said the package was ready. Then she walked away and told us to wait. She never returned. The cold feeling in Marcus's gut crystallized into certainty. These children weren't lost. They were abandoned, deliberately placed in harm's way by someone who should have protected them. The why could wait. Right now, survival took priority. The alley network through Houston's industrial zone was familiar territory. Marcus had walked these routes during his contract work, memorized the patrol patterns and blind spots. Ajax moved with the confidence of a dog who'd navigated worse terrain, his nose working overtime to catalog scents and threats. They were 3 blocks from the checkpoint when police sirens split the air. The loudspeaker crackled overhead, broadcasting in clipped English, and what Marcus assumed was Zarathi. All Zarathi nationals report to checkpoints immediately. Curfew in effect. Human escorts subject to questioning. Kira whimpered. Lyra pulled her closer. Marcus's tactical assessment took maybe 2 seconds. The checkpoint was compromised. The direct route was suicide. The streets were filling with people who ranged from suspicious to actively hostile. And he had 3 alien children under his protection who were probably worth more as political hostages than as living beings. We're not getting to the embassy tonight. His voice stayed level, despite the implications. We find shelter, wait for things to settle, then we move. The abandoned warehouse near Minute Maid Park had been empty last time Marcus checked it during a routine patrol. The security company used it for overflow storage, which meant it stayed off official inventories and mostly forgotten. The loading dock door had a lock his security pass could override. Inside, dust motes danced in the last rays of sunlight, filtering through high windows. Stacked pallets and shipping containers created a maze of shadows. Ajax swept the space methodically, nose down, checking for threats. When the shepherds sat and looked at Marcus, with calm eyes, the all-clear was given. The children sank onto a relatively clean patch of concrete with the kind of exhaustion that suggested adrenaline crash following terror. Marcus pulled out his personal med kit. He never went anywhere without it, old habits from the combat medic days, and knelt beside Kira. "Let me see that knee." She extended her leg with remarkable trust. Marcus cleaned the scrape with antiseptic wipes, applied antibiotic ointment, and covered it with a bandage featuring cartoon dinosaurs, because that's what the VA had in stock, and Marcus had never bothered replacing them. Kira studied the bandage with solemn curiosity. What are these creatures, dinosaurs? Big lizards that died out millions of years ago on Earth. Kids think they're cool. The hint of a smile touched her lips. I think they are cool too. Marcus distributed MREs from his pack, the chicken and rice packets that were least objectionable to people who'd never experienced military rations. The children examined them with scientific interest. Senna opened hers carefully. This is human field sustenance. Yep, keeps soldiers fed when real food isn't available. Marcus tore open his own packet, the familiar smell triggering memories of mass tents and midnight watches. Tastes like cardboard, but it does the job. They ate in silence for a while, the warehouse settling into evening quiet around them. Ajax positioned himself by the door, head on his paws, eyes alert. Lyra finished her meal and studied Marcus with unsettling intensity. You move like a soldier. Desert Storm. Marcus paused mid-bite. How do you know about Desert Storm? My father was a general. He studied Earth military history. He said the Desert Storm campaign demonstrated tactical superiority compensating for technological inferiority. She gestured at Marcus's movements, the way he'd positioned himself with sightlines to all exits. The unconscious patrol, scan his eyes, performed every few minutes. You maintained situational awareness even at rest. You checked exits before settling. You positioned the vulnerable Lias away from doors and windows. Textbook military behavior. Smart kid. Marcus took a drink from his canteen, then passed it around. What else did your father teach you? Lyra's expression shifted, joy dimming into something that looked like old grief. That leadership means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. That peace is harder to maintain than war. That, her voice caught, that dying in service to your people is the highest honor. Was, past tense. All three children's expressions changed, shuddering behind a wall of practiced composure that no child should have to master. Senna's voice came quiet. Father died 3 years ago, at Zareth 7, the last major battle before the treaty. The canteen slipped in Marcus's grip. He caught it, set it down carefully, his hands suddenly unsteady. Zareth 7, the slaughterhouse. The battle where they'd sent in troops against fortified positions without proper intel, without air support, without any of the things that kept soldiers alive when everything went sideways. Marcus had been attached to the 42nd Medical Company, working triage in a field hospital that became a charnel house when casualties started arriving faster than anyone could process. 40 men from his unit went into that battle. Marcus came out with Ajax and enough survivor's guilt to drown in. He looked at these 3 children, orphans, now just like the Iraqi girl from his nightmares, and something inside him cracked. I'm sorry, Marcus's voice came out rough. I was there. Combat medic, field hospital. Worst 3 days of my life. Lost everyone under my command. Kira shifted closer, her small hand finding Ajax's fur. The shepherd leaned into her touch, offering comfort the way he'd been trained. Father said medics were the bravest soldiers. Lyra's eyes shone with unshed tears, because they run toward danger to save others, not to kill. The warehouse settled into deeper darkness. Marcus stood, pulled an emergency blanket from his pack, and arranged it over the children. Kira was already asleep, exhausted by fear and flight. Senna followed quickly. Only Lyra remained awake, her eyes tracking Marcus as he settled with his back against a support column, Ajax at his side. Why are you helping us? Lyra's question hung in the still air. Your people hate us. You could have walked away. No one would have blamed you. Marcus scratched Ajax behind the ears, the familiar motion helping him organize thoughts he'd spent 30 years trying to avoid. Because I've already failed too many kids. Because the war is supposed to be over, and letting children get hurt in the peace makes all those deaths meaningless. Because he paused, searching for words that didn't sound like a therapy session. Because someone has to choose better. Lyra nodded slowly, then curled against her sisters. Marcus sat watch through the night, his old infantry training kicking in, even as his body screamed about the concrete floor and the temperature drop. Ajax shifted positions twice, checking the perimeter both times before settling back at Marcus's side. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, exhaustion dragged Marcus down into a light doze where memories and present blurred together, the Iraqi girl's face morphing into Kira's, the sounds of the field hospital overlaying the warehouse's industrial quiet, the smell of blood and antiseptic mixing with dust and machine oil. He jolted awake to the cold tingle of metal against his throat. 6 Zarathi royal guards in full ceremonial armor surrounded him, energy weapons humming with barely restrained power. Ajax was on his feet, hackles raised a growl building in his chest that promised violence if Marcus gave the word. "Do not move, human." The guard captain's English carried an accent that made each word sharp as broken glass. At Marcus's side, the 3 children were still curled together, fast asleep and oblivious to the standoff developing above them. The guards parted. Empress Selena herself strode through the gap, and Marcus understood immediately why the Zarathi Empire had held together through decades of war. She moved with the kind of presence that demanded attention without requiring it, tall even by Zarathi standards, her emerald skin darker than her daughter's, her ceremonial armor somehow both beautiful and threatening. Her eyes landed on Marcus, then dropped to where her children slept peacefully against the human stranger. "Well," her voice was melodic and commanding in equal measure, the kind of tone that could seduce diplomats or order executions with equal ease. "This is certainly not what I expected to find." Marcus shifted carefully, easing the children onto the emergency blanket rather than his body, "Your Majesty." He bowed as stiffly as his old injuries allowed. "Commander Marcus Webb, retired, currently contracted to Terran Diplomatic Security. Found your daughters under threat in the port district. Kept them safe. That's all." The truth delivered without embellishment. The only currency that mattered when your life balanced on a blade's edge. And yet, Selena circled him, slowly studying him the way a general studies terrain before a battle. Against protocol, against security advisement, against all logic, they chose to trust you. A human stranger. In a city that openly despises my people. "Tell me, Commander Webb, what did you do to earn this?" There was steel behind her words, but also, just for a heartbeat, a glimmer of relief so profound it bordered on breaking. Ajax's growl deepened. The shepherd's eyes tracked Selena's movement, body tensed between Marcus and potential threat. Marcus met the Empress's gaze without flinching. "Protected them. That's all. Honestly, I don't know why they trusted me. Maybe because I was the only one who stopped to listen instead of threaten." The air hung thick with tension. The guards waited for orders. Ajax waited for permission to attack. Selena waited for something Marcus couldn't quite identify. Then Lyra stirred awake, her eyes snapping open. She saw her mother let out a cry of pure joy. Mother, and suddenly all 3 children were scrambling up, babbling in rapid Zarathi, crowding around their mother with reassurances and explanations tumbling over each other. Selena knelt, embraced her daughters with a vulnerability that transformed the cold Empress into simply a mother grateful beyond words. When she stood again, the mask was back in place, but something in her eyes had softened. She studied Marcus with new interest. Her daughters clustered at her side, their hands still reaching for the human who'd become their impromptu guardian. "Commander Webb, our peace is 6 months old, fragile as new ice on a deep lake. Many on both sides would see it shatter. My court is filled with advisors who speak beautiful lies and calculate advantage with every breath." She paused, deliberate. "Perhaps we would benefit from one who speaks uncomfortable truths. Someone my daughters already trust, a rarer gift than you know." Marcus stiffened, the implications hitting him like a mortar round. "Your Majesty, I'm a security contractor. I'm not a diplomat." "Exactly." Selena's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I have diplomats in abundance. Statesmen who navigate protocols like dancers. What I need is honesty. Someone who can see through the masks. Someone who..." Her gaze flickered to her daughters, to Ajax, to the emergency blanket, and the dinosaur bandage on Kira's knee. Someone who protects first and calculates advantage, never. Serve as my Terran liaison. Bridge what war divided. Lara looked up at Marcus with hope lighting her features. Senna and Kira pressed closer, their body language making their wishes clear. Marcus's throat tightened. He thought about the Iraqi girl who died because he couldn't save her fast enough. About the 40 men from his unit who never came home from Zareth 7. About 30 years of survivor's guilt that woke him screaming most nights until Ajax learned to intervene. About 3 alien children who trusted him when no one else would. About an empress who just offered him a purpose beyond walking empty patrols and pretending the nightmares didn't matter. Ma'am, I lost everyone I cared about once. Spent 3 decades carrying that weight. If I can stop it happening to someone else. Marcus straightened despite his protesting joints. I'm in. Selena nodded, satisfaction flickering across her features. Then welcome to Court, Commander. Where every smile hides a knife. She gestured to her guards, issuing orders in rapid Zarathi. The warriors sheathed their weapons, forming up in protective formation. Marcus gathered his sparse belongings, Ajax at his heel. The children clustered around him like he was magnetic, nor their trust absolute, despite knowing him less than 12 hours. They exited the warehouse into Houston's pre-dawn darkness. The convoy of Zarathi security vehicles waited in the street, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent light. Across the intersection, mostly hidden in shadows, a figure watched from a rooftop. Marcus caught the glint of surveillance equipment, the telltale shape of someone observing rather than participating. Every instinct honed by Desert Storm screamed danger. But then Lyra tugged his hand and Senna asked about Ajax's training, and Kira wanted to know if dinosaur bandages came in other animals, and Marcus let himself be pulled toward the vehicles in whatever waited at the Zarathi embassy. The figure on the rooftop lifted a radio. Phase 1 complete. The human is inside. Proceed to Phase 2. The convoy rolled through Houston's empty streets, dawn breaking over a city that didn't know it was about to become a battlefield. The Zarathi embassy occupied what used to be the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, its neoclassical columns now wrapped in organic Zarathi architecture that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. The fusion should have looked awkward. Instead, it looked like the building had been waiting its entire existence for alien enhancement, classical human ambition, married to Zarathi biotechnology, in a statement of forced unity that satisfied no one. Marcus limped through marble corridors that whispered with political tension thick enough to taste. Ajax padded beside him, the shepherd's ears swiveling to track conversations in languages Marcus didn't speak. Movements he couldn't see, but the dog's instincts cataloged with military precision. The quarters they'd assigned him were larger than his apartment, furnished with a mixture of human and Zarathi design that probably cost more than he'd earned in 5 years of contract work. A sleeping platform that adjusted to body temperature. Walls that shifted color with ambient light. A bathroom with fixtures he'd need a manual to operate. Ajax sniffed every corner, checking for threats, then sat by the door with the patience of a soldier on watch. The children had insisted on showing Marcus the grounds before their attendants could protest, Lyra pointing out the memorial gardens where her father's name was carved in both human script and Zarathi symbols. Senna explaining the organic technology that powered the building's life support. Kira simply holding his hand and chattering about everything that caught her attention. Court officials watched with barely concealed hostility. Whispers followed Marcus through every corridor, just loud enough to ensure he heard. Human polluting bloodline proximity. Veteran more like spin. Empress's judgment failing since husband's death. Marcus had survived worse than gossip. Desert Storm had taught him that words couldn't kill you nearly as efficiently as shrapnel, so you learned to ignore the former and respect the latter. The diplomatic reception that evening filled the Grand Hall with 100 guests representing Earth's major powers and Zarathi noble houses. Crystal chandeliers mixed with bioluminescent Zarathi light sculptures, creating shadows that shifted and played across faces that wore smiles like armor. Marcus stood in his dress uniform, medals he'd earned bleeding in foreign deserts, now displayed on his chest, his shoulders rigid with the discomfort of someone who'd spent 3 decades avoiding ceremonies and formal occasions. The uniform fit poorly. He'd gained weight since retirement, then lost it again to stress and irregular eating, leaving fabric that bunched wrong and reminded him constantly of how little he belonged here. Ajax wasn't allowed in the reception hall. Security concern, Marcus felt the absence like a missing limb. A Zarathi noble approached his ceremonial robes, marking him as high-ranking, his smile precise as a scalpel. The emerald skin bore darker striations that Lyra had explained meant military service. This man had fought in the war, probably commanded forces that killed humans Marcus had tried to save. Duke Theron. His English carried an accent that made each word crisp, almost Germanic. The Empress honors you with position far above your station commander. Curious timing. Zarathi guardian abandons royal children. Human hero appears. Convenient. The accusation hung naked in the air. Marcus met his eyes without flinching. Curious Duke. Royal children left unprotected in your capital. Your security apparatus failed. Also convenient. Theron's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. You've survived many battles, Commander. I hope your luck continues. He drifted away before Marcus could respond, melting into the crowd with practiced ease. Another noble materialized at Marcus's elbow, female, her features carrying a familial resemblance to Selena that suggested close relation, her dress more conservative than the Empress's modern fusion style. Lady Vesna's smile was warm honey that somehow felt colder than Theron's hostility. Pay Theron no mind, Commander. He lost much when peace came: military command, political influence, purpose. Some men need war to feel valuable. She sipped something that sparkled like champagne but smelled faintly of flowers. I am Vesna, the Empress's cousin. I wanted to thank you personally for protecting my nieces. Family means everything to us. Marcus nodded carefully. Just did what anyone should. But you are not just anyone, are you? Vesna studied him with interest that felt like examination. Combat medic at Zareth 7, the battle that took my cousin's husband. You saved many that day, I'm told. Not enough. The words escaped before Marcus could stop them for Ruth. He usually kept locked away with the nightmares and the guilt. Vesna's expression softened into something that might have been genuine sympathy. The burden of the healer. To save some is never enough when others slip away. She touched his arm briefly, the gesture somewhere between comfort and calculation. Welcome to court, Commander. I hope you find it less dangerous than your previous battlefields. She glided away, leaving Marcus with the uncomfortable sensation of having been catalogued, assessed, and filed under some category he couldn't identify. Across the hall, Selena stood in conversation with Earth diplomats, her posture regal, her attention absolute. But twice Marcus caught her glance flickering toward him, checking, confirming his presence. Their eyes met. She offered the slightest nod. Then her attention returned to the ambassador from the United States, and Marcus was left wondering what exactly he'd signed up for. The reception dragged on for hours. Marcus's leg ached from standing, old shrapnel wound, sending sparks up his spine that no amount of shifting his weight could alleviate. He counted exits: 3 main, 2 service, 1 emergency that probably led to the kitchen. Old habits. Near midnight, guards finally released him. Marcus returned to his quarters to find Ajax waiting, tail wagging, and a message projected on his wall in holographic Zarathi script that shifted to English as he approached. Training court. Dawn. Come alone. See, the private training court occupied a converted sculpture garden. High walls ensuring privacy, the floor a mixture of traditional matting and Zarathi impact-absorbing biomaterial. Dawn light filtered through leaves that were half earth oak, half something alien, that photosynthesized in colors human eyes shouldn't be able to see. Selena waited in light combat armor, her hair bound back, her stance relaxed but ready. The ceremonial empress had vanished, replaced by something rawer, more dangerous. Marcus approached in PT gear that had seen better decades, his limp more pronounced in the morning cold, Ajax at his heel, until the shepherd found a sunny spot and settled to watch. Your Majesty, Selena's lips quirked. When alone, Marcus. Titles are for court. Here I am, simply someone who needs to know if you can protect my daughters when words fail and violence speaks. She moved without warning, a flowing strike that Marcus barely avoided, muscle memory from basic training 3 lifetimes ago, kicking in before conscious thought. They sparred for 20 minutes, and Marcus learned what humility tasted like. Selena fought with fluid grace that made combat look like dance. Her movements economical and brutally efficient. She disarmed him 4 times, put him on the mat 6 times, and generally demonstrated that an alien empress could absolutely destroy a retired combat medic with bad knees and worse attitude. You fight expecting ambush. She helped him up from the mat, her hand warm against his, rigid, anticipating attack from every direction. Among my people we flow. Redirect rather than resist. Marcus caught his breath, sweat stinging his eyes. Desert storm, PTSD, every shadow's a threat, every sound's incoming fire. Can't turn it off. Selena studied him with something that might have been understanding. My husband died in ambush. Zareth 7. Perhaps we both carry too much guard. The admission hung between them more intimate than the combat. She demonstrated techniques, her hands guiding his arms through proper positions, her body close enough that Marcus caught her scent, something like rain on stone alien but not unpleasant. Her touch lingered longer than strictly instructional. His awareness of her presence sharpened beyond tactical assessment into something he hadn't felt in longer than he cared to admit. Control the breath, control the fear, control the fight. Her voice dropped lower, almost hypnotic. You fought to save lives, not take them. That discipline serves you still. Lost 40 anyway. Marcus's throat tightened. Zareth 7 took everyone I couldn't save fast enough. Selena's hand found his squeezed once. 3 years widowed. The court expects Iron Empress always. With you, her voice caught. With you I can breathe. The moment stretched fragile and dangerous. Their faces were close enough that Marcus could see gold flecks in her eyes, could feel her breath against his skin. Ajax barked once, sharp and urgent. The spell shattered. Marcus spun toward the sound, combat instincts overriding everything else. The dog stood at the edge of the training court, hackles raised, focused on the tea service that had been delivered while they sparred. A servant lay collapsed beside it, unconscious or worse. Marcus reached the tea set in 3 strides, his medic training cataloging symptoms. Rapid, shallow breathing, pinpoint pupils, foam at the lips, poisoning, fast-acting neurotoxin by the look of it. The servant was drugged, forced to deliver poison. Marcus checked the tea, careful not to touch the liquid directly. This was meant for you. Selena's expression went cold as vacuum. Guards materialized from shadows Marcus hadn't realized concealed them, securing the scene with professional efficiency. One guard found a syringe in the servant's pocket. Another discovered the note tucked into the tea service paper, not digital, harder to trace. Selena read it aloud, her voice steady despite the implications. Human cannot protect you, except the inevitable. Marcus studied the scene, his mind shifting into the analytical mode that had kept him alive through Desert Storm. The servant was expendable, drugged, and used. The poison was sophisticated, requiring access to restricted chemicals. The note was deliberate provocation. This was a warning, not the main event. Selena met his eyes. Then the real attack comes soon, and you are now a target too for daring to stand between me and whoever wants me dead. 3 days of training sessions followed, each one building on the last. Marcus, learning to flow rather than resist. Selena, learning to trust someone who didn't want anything from her except honest partnership. They sparred with increasingly complex techniques. They talked about war, about loss, about the weight of decisions that killed people regardless of which choice you made. The attraction between them built with the inevitability of water finding level, unspoken but undeniable. On the 4th day, things changed. Marcus was teaching the children basic self-defense in the memorial gardens. Nothing aggressive, just awareness and evasion techniques any kid should know. Lyra absorbed everything with focused intensity. Senna asked endless questions about leverage and physics. Kira tried to tackle Ajax and ended up in a giggling heap when the shepherd gently pinned her with one paw. The normalcy felt precious, temporary. Ajax's ears swiveled toward the hedge line. His body went rigid. Marcus's hand found the sidearm he'd started carrying at Selena's explicit permission after the poisoning attempt. Get behind me. Now. The children obeyed without question, military precision he'd drilled into them without realizing. 3 figures dropped from the trees, adaptive camouflage flickering as they moved military-grade equipment that shouldn't have been available to anyone outside government arsenals. They moved with professional coordination, target priorities already assigned. The first rushed Lyra. Marcus intercepted with a tackle that drove them both into ornamental hedges, 40 years of suppressed combat fury, channeling through movements his body remembered, even if his conscious mind had tried to forget. Elbow to throat, knee to solar plexus. Disarm the weapon, some kind of injector pistol, and use it as bludgeon against the attacker's temple. The man collapsed stunned, and Marcus was already moving toward the second threat. That one had Senna cornered against a memorial wall. The attacker raised their weapon. Ajax hit them at full sprint, 90 pounds of trained aggression and protective instinct. The shepherd's teeth found the attacker's wrist clamping down until bones ground together and the weapon clattered free. The attacker tried to shake the dog off. Ajax held on with the patience of an animal bred for exactly this kind of work. The third attacker grabbed Kira something that looked like a medical injector pressed against her neck. One move and she's sedated. We walk out of here, no one gets Selena materialized behind the attacker like violence incarnate. She moved with the fluid brutality Marcus had experienced in training but now unleashed with lethal intent. 3 strikes, wrist break, elbow dislocation, knee to kidney, and the attacker was on the ground. Selena standing over them with cold fury radiating from every line of her body. Touch my daughter again. Her voice carried absolute zero. I dare you. Guards flooded the gardens, securing the attackers, checking the children for injuries. Kira wouldn't release Marcus, her small arms locked around his neck, her whole body trembling. Lyra held Senna, both girls pale but composed. Selena moved between them, checking each one with hands that shook despite her controlled expression. Marcus held Kira, murmuring reassurances he'd learned comforting dying soldiers. You're safe, I've got you. Nothing's going to hurt you now, until her trembling eased and she could breathe without sobbing. The interrogation was quick. The attackers were professionals, but not soldiers. Mercenaries hired through cutouts that made direct attribution impossible. Their equipment was Earth-made. Weapons, armor, communications gear, all human manufacture, all traceable to American defense contractors. Marcus stared at the evidence laid out on the security chief's desk and felt something cold settle in his chest. Someone's framing humans, trying to break the alliance. He looked at Selena. And I was here. Convenient scapegoat if things went wrong. The court whispered that evening, speculation and accusation flowing through corridors like poison. Theron and Vesna were notably vocal in Marcus's defense, speaking eloquently about how obviously framed the situation was, how crude the attempt, how insulting to everyone's intelligence. But their words planted seeds, human hero always present during attacks. Perhaps protecting children so he can control Empress. Terran's desperate to maintain alliance at any cost. Marcus found Selena in her private study near midnight, still in the damaged armor from the garden fight, staring at reports with eyes that didn't see the words. He knocked. She waved him in without looking up. My daughters love you. Her voice came flat, exhausted. That is not manipulation. That is gift I will not question. Marcus crossed to her desk, pulled up a chair uninvited, and waited until she met his eyes. Your Majesty, Selena. When alone, please. I am not Empress with you, just woman who is tired of wearing crowns and armor and never knowing who to trust. The mask cracked. She leaned forward, forehead finding his shoulder, and Marcus felt the tremor run through her. Not weakness, but the kind of exhaustion that came from holding together too long with nothing left in reserve. He touched her hair carefully, uncertain of protocols or permission, but unable to ignore her need. I won't let anyone hurt you. Or them. That's not duty. That's personal. Selena lifted her head, their faces inches apart. Personal is dangerous, for both of us. Yeah, Marcus held her gaze. It is. She leaned her forehead against his, the Zarathi gesture of intimacy he'd learned meant trust beyond words. Someone in my inner circle betrayed us. We find them, together. 2 weeks passed, training continued. Court politics swirled. Security tightened. The children adjusted to constant guards, their laughter dimmed, but not extinguished. Marcus established evening story time as routine human fairy tales and Zarathi legends, mixing into something new that belonged to neither culture, and both. Senna started asking questions during the third storytime session, questions that made Marcus's combat instincts scream warnings. Commander Marcus, we heard something. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Something bad. Lyra took over, her voice steady despite obvious fear. We were playing in the library, hide and seek. We heard Duke Theron and Lady Vesna talking in the courtyard below. Kira pressed against Ajax, seeking comfort. They said bad words about Mama. Marcus kept his voice calm, his body language non-threatening, despite the ice forming in his veins. Tell me everything. Exact words if you remember them. The 3 girls took turns reconstructing a conversation that painted treason in clear strokes. Theron and Vesna discussing final solution galanite, purifying bloodline, seizing the throne, ending human contamination. They mentioned tunnels behind the library. They mentioned charges planted in the Empress's chambers. They mentioned a timeline 3 days until the formal gala, celebrating 6 months of peace. Marcus processed the intelligence with the same focus he'd used triaging casualties under fire. He praised the children for their observation and assured them their mother would be safe, sent them to bed with Ajax for comfort and protection. Then he went hunting. The tunnel entrance hid behind a historical tapestry depicting the Treaty of Terra Nova, signing irony sharp enough to cut. Marcus descended into darkness lit only by emergency lighting, his sidearm drawn every sense screaming ambush. The voices reached him before he saw the speakers Theron and Vesna in a wine cellar that probably dated to the building's museum days, their conversation echoing off stone walls. Gala night, Theron's voice carried military precision. Charges in the Empress's chambers. The human veteran dies heroically defending her. We frame it as Terran conspiracy. Alliance shatters chaos, provides cover. We seize Regency claim throne for traditional bloodline. Vesna's response came quieter. And the princesses, they've bonded with the human. Collateral damage. Theron's words carried no hesitation. Bloodlines corrupted anyway. We start fresh, pure. Marcus's vision went red at the edges, Desert Storm flashbacks mixing with present, Fury children in body bags. Medics overwhelmed the Iraqi girl dying while he held her 40 men under his command, never coming home. Never again. The words were prayer and promise both. His foot caught a wine bottle. Glass shattered against stone, the sound explosive in the confined space. Someone's here! Theron's voice went cold. Find them! Marcus ran, footsteps pursued. He knew these tunnels now from 3 weeks of security patrols, knew the branching paths and dead ends. He led them away from the Empress's quarters towards service corridors where Ajax waited and guards he trusted could be summoned. He burst from a maintenance exit, bleeding from a tunnel, scrape his radio already transmitting emergency codes. Selena met him in her study. She'd been working late, still in day robes, her hair down in a way he'd never seen. She saw blood and went rigid. Marcus laid out everything, the children's intelligence, his reconnaissance, the overheard conspiracy, the timeline. 3 nights. Thrawn, and Vesna. Your own cousin planning to kill you, frame humans, restart the war, murder your daughters. Selena's fury was cold vacuum. No explosion. Just ice crystallizing into absolute zero. My cousin. Her voice barely whispered. My husband's most trusted general. Both. Then she crossed to Marcus, checked his injuries with hands that shook, pulled him into an embrace that felt like drowning and salvation both. You could have died in those tunnels. Worth it. Marcus held her carefully, mindful of protocols that no longer seemed to matter. You're worth it. They stood like that for a moment that stretched and compressed simultaneously, 2 broken people holding together through sheer will. Then Selena pulled back and the Empress returned. We set a trap tonight. Used their plan against them. They worked through pre-dawn hours, Marcus providing tactical expertise from Desert Storm urban combat, Selena adding her knowledge of palace layout and loyal guards. Captain Renek, the guard commander, who'd proven his loyalty, was brought into the planning. 8 guards they could trust absolutely. Recording devices planted. Explosives located and disarmed, then replaced with duds that would produce smoke but no real damage. Positions assigned. Fallback plans developed. The plan was simple: fake Selena's vulnerability, let the conspirators enter her chambers thinking they had the upper hand, capture them with full evidence. Dawn broke over Houston. Marcus hadn't slept. Neither had Selena. They stood on her private balcony watching the city wake, knowing they had one more day before everything exploded. Selena touched his face, her hand lingering. If this fails, my daughters become orphans. Marcus covered her hand with his. Then it won't fail. I've lost everyone I cared about once, not happening again. She searched his eyes. You care. About us. Truly. More than I should. Marcus's throat tightened. More than's probably smart. Selena leaned her forehead against his, that gesture of trust and intimacy. Not possible to care too much. They stood like that as the sun climbed higher. 2 people choosing to believe in something beyond war and loss and the comfortable darkness of isolation. Ajax's bark interrupted them, time for morning rounds duties that couldn't wait regardless of conspiracies or looming battles. Selena straightened the Empress mask, settling back into place. Tomorrow night we end this. Or die trying, Marcus thought, but didn't say. The day passed in orchestrated normalcy. Gala preparations proceeded. Guests arrived. Theron and Vesna performed their roles perfectly. Loyal nobles concerned for peace defenders. Of tradition, voices of reason. Marcus watched them work the crowd and remembered every soldier who died because someone wanted power more than peace. Evening came. The grand hall filled with dignitaries. Selena appeared in formal armor dress that blended Zarathi ceremonial tradition with human elegance, a living symbol of the alliance they were about to fight for. She caught Marcus's eyes across the ballroom. One slight nod. Ajax pressed against his leg, offering comfort and solidarity both. Midnight approached. The trap was set. And somewhere into the palace, explosives waited to determine whether peace survived or died in fire and betrayal. Selena's private chambers lay in darkness, the only illumination coming from Houston's skyline through reinforced windows. Marcus pressed against the wall inside a hidden alcove the architects had built for servants, cramped, uncomfortable, perfect ambush position. His sidearm felt heavier than it should, loaded with rubber rounds that would incapacitate without killing. Selena wanted her cousin taken alive. Marcus wanted anyone threatening the children to stop breathing, but he'd follow orders. Ajax waited with the children in the reinforced panic room 3 floors down, the shepherd's presence worth more than a dozen guards for keeping Lyra Senna and Kira calm. Captain Renek had the recording equipment running 8 loyal guards positioned in concealment points throughout the suite. The bed held pillows arranged to suggest a sleeping form. The trap was perfect. Too perfect. Marcus's Desert Storm instincts screamed that perfect plans never survive first contact. Footsteps in the corridor. Multiple figures moving with military coordination. The door opened without sound. Someone had disabled the security alerts inside access, confirming what they already knew. 8 figures entered Theron and Vesna, leading 6 conspirators in combat gear that absorbed light faces hidden behind adaptive masks. They moved toward the bed with weapons drawn and injector pistols designed for quiet assassination, loaded with the compounds that would simulate heart failure. Political deniability. Clean kill. Theron reached the bed, pulled back the covers, found pillows. His curse was vicious. Trap. Abort. The lights snapped on, blinding in their suddenness. Captain Renek's guards burst from concealment, points weapons trained. Selena emerged from the bathroom panel in full combat armor, her own energy weapon humming with barely restrained power. Surrender. Now. Her voice carried imperial command that expected obedience. Theron's laugh was bitter. You think I planned for only one outcome? He pressed something on his wrist. The walls erupted in fire and thunder. Not the charges Marcus had located and neutralized earlier, those had been decoys meant to be found. These were the real explosives planted deeper hidden, better their locations fed to Theron by surveillance Marcus had missed. Someone else in the security apparatus had been watching their countermeasures, reporting back, ensuring the Duke stayed 3 moves ahead. Betrayal within betrayal, the kind of tactical depth that explained why Theron had commanded armies. The blast radius had been calculated with surgical precision, devastating enough to kill targets, controlled enough to avoid bringing down the entire wing and alerting the palace. Marcus's world became pressure wave and shrapnel, his body lifting and slamming into the alcove wall with force that drove air from his lungs. Training kicked in before conscious thought. Protect and survive. He rolled away from falling debris, saw Selena diving behind an overturned bureau, her armor cracked but holding. 2 of Renek's guards were down unconscious or worse. The others engaged conspirators through smoke and chaos. Marcus forced himself upright, every joint screaming protest. Blood soaked through his tactical vest where shrapnel had punched through Kevlar into flesh not deep enough for immediate death, but enough that warmth spread across his ribs in patterns he recognized from too many field hospitals. Through the smoke, Theron rose with predatory grace. The Duke had positioned himself in the blast safe zone body armor, absorbing what little reached him. He grabbed a fallen plasma rifle, real weapon now, not quite assassination tool, and swung it towards Selena. Marcus didn't think. Thinking took too long, allowed space for fear or calculation of odds. He moved on pure instinct, channeling decades of guilt that demanded he not fail again. Not here, not when 3 children waited floors below, trusting him to keep their mother alive. He threw himself between the Empress and the weapon. The plasma bolt caught him square in the chest. His tactical vest was military grade, designed for this exact scenario, but the kinetic impact felt like being kicked by a freight train. The world tilted. His back hit marble with force that sent fresh agony through already damaged ribs. Consciousness flickered at the edges. Above him, chaos continued. Energy weapons discharged their distinctive whine, cutting through the ringing in his ears. Guards shouted in Zarathian English. Somewhere distant, Ajax's barking crescendoed the panic room door, opening children's voices, crying out despite orders to stay put. Selena was screaming his name, her voice raw with terror that no empress should reveal publicly. Marcus's vision tunneled. He saw Theron advancing on Selena, saw her trying to rise from behind the bureau, saw the rifle coming up for a second shot, that her damaged armor wouldn't stop. Adrenaline hit his system like high-voltage current. His hand found his sidearm fingers wrapping around familiar polymer grip. Muscle memory bypassed pain and shock training from Fort Sam Houston 4 decades ago, asserting itself. 3-round center mass, the grouping they drilled until it became automatic. Rubber rounds at this range hit like sledgehammers. Theron staggered, gasped, went down hard. But the Duke was still moving, crawling toward the weapon with determination that spoke of someone who'd survived worse and refused to quit. Marcus forced himself up. Something in his back was definitely broken vertebrae, grinding in ways anatomy wasn't designed for. Blood loss was becoming critical. He recognized the symptoms from treating countless casualties. Distant coldness in his extremities, vision narrowing, time dilating into strange clarity where each second stretched elastic. He stumbled forward, fell more than lunged, and landed on Theron with all his remaining weight. No martial arts now, no elegant Zarathi techniques or military combatives. Just desperate violence from a man who'd watched too many people die and absolutely refused to add 3 more children to that count. His fists connected with Theron's face once, twice, 3 times. Knuckles split against Zarathi bone structure that was denser than human. The Duke fought back, landing blows that Marcus barely felt through the adrenaline and blood loss. But Marcus had position and fury and 30 years of survivor's guilt channeling through hands that wouldn't stop until the threat was eliminated. Theron's eyes rolled back. Consciousness fled. Marcus tried to rise, managed to get one knee under himself, then collapsed onto blood-slicked marble. The world spun in slow, lazy circles. Selena's face appeared above him, her hands pressing against his wounds, her lips moving in words he couldn't hear over the high-pitched ringing that filled his skull. Then smaller faces, Lyra Senna, Kira, their formal dresses torn from forcing through palace corridors, tears streaming down emerald-skinned hands reaching for him with desperate urgency. Ajax pushed through the shepherd's nose, finding Marcus's face-tongue licking frantically, whining in distress that cut through even the ringing. Marcus tried to speak. His lips formed words, but sound wouldn't come. He tried again, forced air through a throat that felt crushed. 4 words before darkness claimed him completely. Selena, girls, safe, then nothing. The void was complete. No dreams, no memories, no sense of time passing. Just absence. Voices filtered in, eventually distant and distorted like hearing underwater. Medical equipment beeping steady rhythms. The antiseptic smell that triggered every Desert Storm Field Hospital memory, simultaneously dragging him toward consciousness through layers of sedation and trauma. His eyes cracked open to white ceiling tiles. Fluorescent lights dimmed to minimize patient discomfort. IV lines snaking into both arms. Monitoring equipment displaying vital signs in steady green tracings. Pain was present, but distant chemical suppression keeping it manageable while ensuring he remained aware enough to heal. His chest felt wrapped in concrete. Breathing required conscious effort. Moving anything below his neck seemed ambitious at best. Ajax's head rested on the edge of the bed, brown eyes watching with focused intensity that suggested the shepherd had been maintaining this vigil for considerable time. The dog's tail started wagging when Marcus's eyes opened, the motion careful and controlled like Ajax understood sudden movement might cause problems. Movement to his left drew his attention. Selena sat in a chair pulled close enough that her hand held his, still wearing the damaged armor from the fight. Dried blood, his blood staining her hands and forearms. Her head rested against the mattress, eyes closed in exhausted sleep that looked more like collapse than rest. More movement revealed three small figures huddled on the floor with blankets Ajax positioned protectively among them. The children had camped out in his hospital room, clearly refusing to leave despite rules and protocol, and probably multiple attempts to relocate them. Marcus's throat worked. His voice came out rusty, barely above a whisper. Hey. Selena's eyes snapped open. She looked at him like he was miracle and curse, both relief and fury warring across features that had clearly been holding everything together through sheer will. You died. Her voice cracked. Twice. On the operating table. Your heart stopped, and they brought you back, and it stopped again. She pressed her face against his hand, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for however long he'd been unconscious. Medical staff had probably sedated him for days, maybe longer. The timeline felt elastic, untrustworthy. The children woke, saw him conscious, made sounds between laughter and crying. Kira climbed onto the bed despite nurses' probable protests, curled against his side with exquisite care to avoid IV lines and monitoring leads. Lyra and Senna pressed close on the other side, their hands finding his with desperate gentleness. Thought you dead like Papa. Kira's voice was tiny, fragile in ways that broke something in Marcus's chest that had nothing to do with physical trauma. Thought you gone forever. Marcus's free hand found her hair stroked gently despite the effort required. Takes more than explosions to stop stubborn old medics. His attempt at humor fell flat, voice shaking too much. You three okay? We helped stop Lady Vesna. Senna's voice carried pride mixed with residual fear. When the explosion happened, Ajax forced the panic room door open. We called guards like you taught us, blocked the tunnel exits. She tried to escape but found us and Ajax waiting. You did perfect, Marcus squeezed her hand, the gesture requiring more strength than it should. Saved your mom, saved everyone, I'm proud of you. Lyra just held his hand and cried silently, her composure finally breaking after maintaining it through crisis and aftermath. Ajax pressed his head against Marcus's leg, offering comfort the way he'd done for 8 years of nightmares and panic attacks, the shepherd's presence grounding him when everything else felt uncertain. Selena composed herself with visible effort, wiping her eyes, straightening her posture into something resembling the empress the court expected. Theron and Vesna are in custody. 14 total conspirators arrested. Full confessions, extracted recording evidence, made denial impossible. She paused, her hand tightening on his. You saved my life, saved all of us, just doing what needed doing. Marcus's chest ached with more than physical pain emotion, threatening to overwhelm chemical suppression. Girls are okay. That's what matters. They are more than okay. Selena's smile was fierce maternal pride. They were brave and smart, and everything their father would have been proud of. Everything I am proud of. The next 6 weeks blurred together in a fog of surgery, recovery, and physical therapy. Marcus's back would never fully heal. Shrapnel embedded too close to spine for safe removal meant permanent nerve damage. His limp was worse now, the explosion's kinetic impact compounding old Desert Storm injuries into something that required a cane for anything beyond short distances. The doctors talked about disability ratings and medical retirement, with gentle tones usually reserved for delivering terminal diagnoses. They spoke of what he'd lost: full mobility, pain-free existence, the ability to move without constant awareness of his body's limitations. Marcus mostly focused on what he'd kept his life, the children who visited daily bringing drawings and stories and updates on Ajax's spoiling by palace staff, and Selena, who came every evening after official duties to sit with him for hours. They talked about everything except the obvious question hanging between them like smoke. What happened next when a human veteran and an alien empress had crossed every professional boundary into territory neither could name but both felt with increasing intensity? 4 weeks and Marcus could walk with the cane. 5 weeks he could manage stairs with assistance. 6 weeks the medical staff cleared him for discharge with prescriptions and warnings and follow-up appointments he'd probably ignore. He found himself in the Memorial Gardens one evening, watching Houston's sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded him why he'd survived when others hadn't. Ajax sat beside him, the shepherd's warmth a comfort he'd learned to accept rather than question. Selena found him there. She looked nervous, an expression he'd seen her face down assassins and court intrigue without showing, but now she fidgeted with her robes like a girl at her first formal dance. Walk with me. Not a command despite her position, a request laden with uncertainty. They moved through the garden slowly, Marcus's cane clicking against stone paths, Ajax ranging ahead to give them space the dogs somehow understood they needed. The silence stretched comfortable and terrifying, both waited with everything unsaid. My people expect me to remarry eventually. Selena's voice stayed carefully neutral, each word chosen with diplomatic precision. Continue bloodline, strengthen throne, political necessity that cannot be ignored indefinitely. Marcus's heart sank. Makes sense, you need someone who can help with. There is ancient law. Selena interrupted, her words rushing now like breaking through a dam. Seldom invoked. Last used 4 generations ago when Empress Sareth chose a consort from the mining colonies, someone born in poverty, who proved worth through loyalty and sacrifice. She stopped walking, turned to face him directly. The ruler may choose a consort from any world, any species, if they prove devotion through exceptional valor, if they demonstrate willingness to die protecting what matters most. Marcus stared, hope and disbelief warring in his chest. You threw yourself on an explosion to save me. Selena's voice shook despite obvious efforts at control. Protected my daughters as if they were your own blood. Exposed treason at cost of your life, died twice and came back both times. Rebuilt my ability to trust when I thought that capacity had died with my husband. She paused, gathering courage visible in the set of her shoulders. And you made me want to live again. Not just survive through duty and obligation. Actually live. Feel joy. Believe in possibility beyond managing crisis and maintaining power. Selena knelt, reversal of every protocol. Empress kneeling before common soldier in a gesture that would scandalize the court and probably violate a dozen traditional strictures. Marcus Webb. Her eyes met his without flinching. Would you accept the role of crown consort? Not for alliance or political advantage. Not because treaties require human representation. Because my daughters love you. Because I love you. The words hung in evening air, heavy with jasmine, and possibility waiting for response that would change everything or shatter something fragile they'd built through crisis and proximity. I'm 68 years old. Marcus's throat tightened, forcing words past emotion that threatened to choke him. Broken veteran with PTSD and a body held together by spite and surgical steel. You're going to outlive me by centuries. Your daughters are going to watch me age and die while they're still young, and they will watch you be their father until you cannot anymore. Selena interrupted gently. Then they will remember you always as the human who chose love over fear, family over loneliness. That legacy is worth building, even if time limits how long we have. She reached up, touched his face with hands that shook despite her controlled expression. I spent 3 years as widow, convinced my heart died with my husband in that ambush. You taught me otherwise. However many years we have, 10, 20, if we're fortunate 30, they are a gift I never expected. I intend to cherish every single day. The question is, do you choose us? Marcus thought about every patient who'd slipped away despite his best efforts, every promise of safety he couldn't keep, about the faces that haunted his dreams, children caught in wars they didn't start, soldiers who trusted him to bring them home, about the unit that went into Zareth 7 whole and came out shattered, about decades of wondering why he'd been spared when better people died, about 3 alien children who trusted him absolutely, about an empress who'd let him see behind her masks and armor, about choosing love over the comfortable, familiar darkness he'd lived in for 30 years. Yes, his voice broke. God help me, yes, I choose family. I choose you. Selena Rose produced a ceremonial blade with shaking hands. The Zarathi bonding ritual required blood small cuts on each palm, mixing together, symbolizing eternal partnership that transcended individual mortality. She performed the cuts with ritual precision, learned in childhood movements, careful and deliberate. Then she pressed her palm to his. Their blood-mixed warmth spreading between joined hands, 2 beings from different worlds making promises that had no legal framework, but felt more binding than any treaty. She spoke words in Zarathi that Marcus didn't understand but felt in his bones, ancient vows that predated space travel and first contact with humanity. Her voice carried weight of tradition and defiance, both choosing personal happiness over political convenience. Then she pressed her forehead to his, that simple act that meant more than words could express: trust, absolute vulnerability offered without reservation, partnership sealed. Marcus kissed her. First real kiss after months of tension and fear and growing connection that neither had named. She kissed back with fierce intensity, one hand fisted in his shirt, the other still pressed palm to palm with his in the ritual binding. Behind them, hidden poorly behind a hedge, three children's voices erupted in cheers. Lyra and Senna and Kira burst from concealment, rushing to embrace both adults in a tangle of limbs and laughter and joy that dissolved any remaining formality. Ajax barked approval, tail wagging, with such enthusiasm his entire back half moved in rhythm. Papa Marcus official now Kira's declaration carried absolute certainty, as if the universe had simply been waiting for adults to catch up with obvious truth. Finally, Senna's relief was palpable. Took you long enough. We were starting to think we'd need to arrange everything ourselves. Lyra just held tight, her arms around both Marcus and her mother, her voice thick with emotion. Family. Real family again. They stood like that while Houston's sky shifted from gold to purple to deep blue, five beings from two worlds choosing to build something new from the ashes of war and loss and decades of isolation. The next 3 weeks became organized chaos. Marcus learned royal protocols with the enthusiasm of someone facing dental surgery, necessary but unpleasant. The children helped drilling him on proper forms of address and ceremonial procedures with patience that suggested they understood his discomfort and were invested in his success. Formal dining etiquette required learning to use 17 different utensils in precise order. Court bowing protocols depended on rank and relationship and context. Walking pace during ceremonial processionals had specific rhythms. Marcus absorbed it all with the same grim determination that had carried him through Desert Storm, treating it like mission prep, where failure meant embarrassing an empress who deserved better. His old Marine buddies arrived 2 days before the ceremony, 8 men in their late 60s and early 70s survivors from other units who'd found each other in VA support groups and stayed connected through decades. They descended on the embassy like a geriatric invasion force, took one look at Marcus in formal robes, and laughed until tears streamed. You always did have weird taste in women, Webb. Sergeant Chen, retired, slapped his back hard enough to hurt. But damn if you didn't land an empress. That's some next-level overachieving. The ceremony filled the Grand Hall with 1,000 guests. Earth's major powers sent representatives. Zarathi noble houses attended, and force media from 6 planets broadcast live. The fusion of traditions had taken months to negotiate. Human wedding, mixed with Zarathi bonding ritual, creating something that belonged to neither culture exclusively and both cultures completely. The hall itself was transformed, crystal chandeliers mixed with bioluminescent Zarathi light sculptures that pulsed in rhythm with music. Flowers from Earth and Zarathi homeworld were arranged in patterns that told stories in both aesthetic traditions. The air smelled like jasmine and something alien that Marcus's brain interpreted as rain on stone. Lyra, Senna, and Kira served as flower girls, a human tradition they'd embraced with enthusiasm. They wore dresses that blended Zarathi silk with human lace, in colors that shifted between purple and gold depending on angle and light. Each carried bioluminescent flowers that pulsed with soft light, synchronized to their heartbeats, a Zarathi touch that created an ethereal effect. Ajax walked behind them in a formal vest, carrying the ceremonial rings in a pouch, secured to his harness, his dignity, absolute despite the giggling from younger guests. The shepherd had been bathed and groomed to perfection, his dark coat gleaming, his movements precise as any trained military escort. Marcus stood at the altar in his dress uniform, medals from Desert Storm displayed alongside Zarathi honors Selena had granted for saving her life and exposing the conspiracy. The uniform fit better now. Palace staff had it tailored properly, ensuring fabric sat correctly across shoulders that had carried too much for too long. His hands shook slightly. Sergeant Chen stood beside him as best man, offering whispered commentary that was probably inappropriate, but definitely helped with the nerves. Relax, Webb. Chen's voice carried barely contained laughter. You've survived worse than this. Remember that firefight outside Basra? This is just ceremony. No incoming mortars. Then Selena entered, and Marcus forgot how to breathe. She wore a gown that was artwork and armor, both Zarathi ceremonial silk in deep emerald that matched her skin and made her look like she'd been carved from precious stone. Human lace overlay told stories and patterns that required close examination to appreciate scenes of peace negotiations and cultural exchange. and two species choosing cooperation over continued conflict. Her hair was bound with jewels that caught light and threw rainbows across marble floors. She moved with the grace of a warrior and the dignity of a ruler, but her eyes found his across the distance with unmistakable vulnerability, the Empress allowing herself to be simply woman, choosing her partner. The ceremony proceeded in two languages, each section translated, each vow spoken twice to ensure both cultures witnessed the binding. An Earth minister and a Zarathi elder officiated jointly their cooperation itself, a statement of the alliance this union represented. Selena went first, Zarathi tradition, placing the ruler's words before the consort's. She spoke in her native tongue, first the flowing syllables carrying weight of formal ritual, then repeated in English for the human guests and those watching across 6 planets. Marcus Webb. Her voice carried through the hall, steady despite emotion visible in the tightness around her eyes. You entered my life as stranger, became protector of my children when their own people failed them, revealed traitors in my court at risk of your life, sacrificed your body for my safety, died, and returned because you are too stubborn to abandon those you've sworn to protect. But more than this, you taught me to trust again after betrayal, to hope again after loss, to love again when I thought that capacity had died with my husband. You showed me that strength includes vulnerability, that partnership requires honesty, that peace is built through individual choices as much as treaties. I vow to honor your courage, not the flashy kind that seeks glory, but the quiet kind that keeps promises when no one is watching. To cherish your wisdom, earned through loss and survival. To build a future where our peoples stand together as you stood for me and my daughters. Until stars die and universe grows cold, you are mine, and I am yours. Marcus's turn. His voice came rougher emotion, making speech difficult, 3 decades of avoiding these exact feelings, making articulation challenging. Empress Selena, I came to your world broken, haunted by faces of people I couldn't save from wars that didn't care about good intentions or medical training or how hard you tried. He paused, seeing clearly now how much he'd been carrying, how the weight had bent him without breaking him completely. Convinced I had nothing left to give anyone. That the best I could offer was walking patrols and avoiding attachment because attachment meant more loss I couldn't survive. His throat tightened, but he pushed through. You and your daughters gave me purpose when I thought mine was gone. Gave me family when I thought I'd lost mine forever. Gave me permission to be more than the worst day of my life, more than the sum of my failures and regrets. I vow to protect you not because duty demands it, but because I choose it freely. To stand beside you through whatever comes good or bad, easy or impossible. To love you until my last breath. And maybe if there's something after death, beyond that too. The exchange of symbols followed ceremonial daggers representing Zarathi trust with weapons, each blade forged specifically for this ceremony, balanced perfectly for the recipient's hand. Wedding bands representing human commitment in metal and stone. Marcus's ring engraved with Zarathi symbols, meaning partnership, and Selena's engraved with English words, chosen family. They performed the blood oath, publicly repeating the ritual from the garden, small cuts, palms pressed together, their mixed blood symbolizing partnership beyond species or worlds. The physical sensation was secondary to the emotional weight, the public declaration of commitment that couldn't be undone without betraying everything both had become. The officiant called for objections, traditional moment of tension, where anyone could challenge the union's validity. Silence held for 3 heartbeats, 4, 5. Then applause erupted, thunderous and genuine from humans and Zarathi alike, who chose to believe peace was possible if these two could make it work. Marcus pulled Selena close and kissed her deeply, human tradition, that the crowd loved protocol, be damned. She kissed back with enthusiasm that suggested maybe some human traditions had merit worth adopting. The children cheered loudest, their joy unrestrained by dignity or protocol. Ajax barked once approval, clear in tone and tail wagging. The reception lasted hours. Food from both worlds filled tables. Earth cuisine prepared by human chefs. Zarathi dishes that required careful explanation for human guests not familiar with bioluminescent garnishes. Music blended genres, creating fusion that belonged to neither tradition exclusively. Marcus danced with Selena, with each of the children, with his old Marine buddies, who gave him endless grief about robbing the cradle, even though Zarathi aging meant Selena was technically older by significant margin. The teasing was affectionate acceptance wrapped in humor, the way soldiers showed love without admitting it directly. Near midnight, exhausted and happy, in ways he'd forgotten were possible, Marcus found himself on a balcony with Selena. Houston's lights spread to the horizon, the city that had been hostile 6 months ago, now home in ways that surprised him. Her hand found his fingers intertwining. Scared, her voice held curiosity, not judgment. The question gave him permission to be honest, terrified. Marcus admitted what he couldn't say publicly, the vulnerability possible only in private darkness. I'm 68 with PTSD and a body held together by spite and surgical steel. You're going to outlive me by centuries. Your daughters are going to watch me age and die while they're still young enough that my death will hurt. They will watch you be their father until you cannot anymore. Selena interrupted gently. Then they will remember you always as the human who chose love over fear, who taught them that family isn't defined by biology or species. That legacy outlasts physical life. She touched his face, her hand warm against evening chill. I spent 3 years as widow, convinced my heart died with my husband in that ambush. You taught me otherwise. However many years we have, 10, 20, if we're fortunate 30, they are a gift I never expected. I intend to cherish every single day rather than mourning the ending before it arrives. Marcus kissed her again, slower this time, savoring rather than celebrating. Yeah, me too. 6 months passed. Spring came to Houston, bringing heat that made even Zarathi uncomfortable. The embassy settled into new rhythms, Marcus training Joint Terran-Zarathi security forces, teaching younger soldiers that peace required vigilance, different from but equal to war's demands. The court had been rebuilt after the purge. Theron and Vesna had been tried, convicted, exiled to a prison colony on Titan, far enough that their poison couldn't reach Earth or Zarathi space, but close enough that their fate served as warning. The 14 conspirators followed their noble titles, stripped their wealth, redistributed to victims of their plotting. New faces filled the halls, chosen for loyalty and competence rather than bloodline and tradition. Marcus stood in the training court one morning, demonstrating close-quarters tactics to a class of 40 cadets, 20 human, 20 Zarathi, all young enough to have missed the war. His limp was worse in morning's damaged nerves and old shrapnel, sending sparks up his spine that required conscious effort to ignore. But he compensated with experience and teaching ability that turned limitation into lesson. Peace is an absence of conflict. His voice carried authority earned through scars and survival. It's choosing understanding over violence. Every single day. Sometimes multiple times per day when old prejudices surface. That choice is harder than pulling a trigger, but it's worth making. He demonstrated a disarming technique that worked regardless of species anatomy, his movements still precise despite age and injury. The technique emphasized redirecting force rather than opposing it, using attackers' momentum against them, principles that applied beyond physical combat to diplomatic conflict. A young Zarathi cadet volunteered to attack. Marcus flowed through the defense, his body remembering training from decades ago, ending with the cadet on the mat and the practice weapon in Marcus's hand. See, not about being strongest or fastest, about being smarter and using what you have efficiently. Afterward, walking back to the main embassy, he found the children in the memorial gardens with Ajax. They'd grown in 6 months, Lara taller, her bearing more diplomatic as she absorbed lessons from her mother and human ambassadors. Senna absorbed in a medical text, fascinated by interspecies physiology after watching doctors save Marcus's life. Kira working with Ajax on new training routines, determined to become a veterinarian specializing in earth animals. Papa Marcus Kira waved enthusiastically. Watch Ajax heal, sit down, roll over. The shepherd performed each command perfectly, his patience with the small Zarathi girl absolute. Age had slowed him slightly, but Ajax's devotion to his job and to this particular child who'd claimed him remained unwavering. Looking good, kiddo. Marcus settled onto a bench, grateful for rest. His body demanded more frequently. You keep that up, Ajax is going to think you're his actual handler. I am his handler. Kira's declaration carried certainty. You said I could be when I was ready. I am ready now. Fair enough, Marcus smiled. He's yours. Just take care of him. Always. Kira hugged the shepherd, who tolerated the affection with dignified patience. Lyra approached her datapad displaying diplomatic correspondence. Mother wants to know if you can attend the Unity Council meeting this afternoon. Ambassador Chen requested Terran military perspective on joint patrol protocols. Tell her yes. Marcus checked his schedule mentally. Training's done by noon. I can be there. Senna looked up from her text concern, evident despite attempts to hide it. Are you feeling well? Your movement is stiffer than usual today. Old wounds acting up. Marcus waved off her concern, not wanting to worry them unnecessarily. Happens when weather changes. Nothing to worry about. But they did worry these three alien children who'd adopted him as father. Their concern was palpable and genuine, the kind of love that made his chest tight with emotion he'd forgotten he could feel without it hurting. That evening, he found Selena in her private quarters reviewing reports with one hand, while the other rested on her abdomen in a gesture that was becoming habitual. She looked up when he entered, smiled in a way that transformed her from empress to simply woman, happy to see her partner. The doctors confirmed this morning. Her voice held wonder and slight nervousness. Hybrid pregnancy is viable. Daughter as I predicted. Due in 7 months. Marcus crossed to her and knelt awkwardly, his damaged knee protesting the movement, but the moment too important to remain standing. He placed his hand over hers on her abdomen, where their daughter grew unprecedented proof that two species could create something new. Girl, huh? His voice came rough with emotion. 4 daughters, Ajax and I are outnumbered and doomed. Selena laughed, the sound unguarded and joyful. You survived war, an assassination, and my court politics. I think you can survive 4 daughters who adore you. 5, actually. Marcus grinned. Pretty sure Ajax identifies as one of your daughters at this point. The way Kira spoils him, he's basically royalty. They sat together as Houston's sunset painted the sky in colors both Earth and Zarathi understood: gold and crimson and purple beauty that transcended species or worlds. The final scene came full circle 9 months after everything started. Marcus walking Houston's spaceport again, Ajax at his side, the district transformed in ways both obvious and subtle. Fewer barriers divided human and Zarathi zones. More integration in commercial areas. Children of both species playing together under watchful parent supervision. Old prejudices died slower than law mandated, but progress was visible if you looked for it. A young Zarathi child stood crying near a checkpoint, clearly lost, clearly terrified. Human passers-by mostly ignored her old habits easier than new behaviors. Some Zarathi adults hurried past, too unwilling to get involved in potential complications. Marcus didn't hesitate, didn't calculate risk or consider protocol. He simply knelt, mindful of the leg that had betrayed him since Desert Storm, but moving past the pain, and offered his hand. Hey there, you look lost. Let's find your parents together. The child's eyes went wide with recognition, not of Marcus specifically, but of his face that had been broadcast across 6 planets as the human who married an empress, who chose partnership over isolation, whose story represented possibility for peace. You are crowned consort Marcus. Her voice held awe. Just Marcus when helping someone. He helped her stand. Your name, Tala. Nice to meet you, Tala. Now let's get you home. Her parents appeared moments later, frantic and grateful. They recognized him immediately, thanked him with sincerity that suggested maybe possibly peace had a chance if enough individuals chose it repeatedly. Marcus watched them leave, Ajax pressed against his leg, the shepherd's warmth a comfort he'd learned to accept rather than question. His phone buzzed, message from Selena, asking when he'd be home. Kira had new tricks to show him with Ajax. Senna wanted his opinion on a medical case study. Lyra needed help preparing for her first diplomatic negotiation. Dinner was in an hour and she was craving Earth food, specifically the terrible MREs he'd shared with the children that first night, because pregnancy did weird things to taste preferences. Home. The word carried weight it hadn't held in decades. Marcus smiled, scratched Ajax's ears, and started walking. His limp was worse after a long day. His back ached in ways that suggested he'd pay for this evening's activities. Tomorrow his scars pulled tight. But he was walking toward family, toward purpose, toward a future he'd never imagined possible when he'd been just another broken veteran trying to survive one more day. The voiceover that would close the story played in his mind. Words he'd maybe write down when arthritis finally caught up with him completely. I spent 30 years carrying the weight of being the one who walked away when better people died. Carrying ghosts from battles, I survived through luck more than skill. Took three alien princesses and their mother to teach me something I'd forgotten during decades of isolation. Redemption isn't about the past you can't change. It's about the future you choose to build one decision at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one choice to love instead of hide. I chose love over fear, family over loneliness, peace over the comfortable, familiar darkness of war that had defined me for so long. And somehow, impossibly, that choice saved me. The camera would fade on Marcus walking through Houston streets toward the embassy Ajax. At his side, the sun setting behind them in colors that promised tomorrow would come, whether you were ready or not. A man who'd found purpose in protection and peace in partnership, who'd learned that being chosen by people you loved mattered more than any medal or rank. From warrior to guardian to father, the truest peace is found in protecting what you love.